Moving bed filters. They are awesome for a number of reasons, but probably the most important is really simple. You never need to maintenance them. You heard that right. You never need to maintenance them. But there are a number of other reasons why these filters are possibly the best potential filtration method out there. Let's talk about why moving bed filters are awesome. Hello everyone, this is Bentley. We're doing the opposite sides we've done many times in this series. Last week we talked about the negatives of moving bed filters. Today we're going to talk about the positives, and I said it in the intro, and it's really true. You'd never need to maintenance it. That's probably the most important and biggest headline frame thing to go with, is you don't need to maintenance them. And let's understand why. Right? The basic function, whether it is your small, inside the tank, or DIY versions, think the Zist Bubble Bio. You can make them out of like pop bottles. But there's a lot of different things that are very similar to those, but those are the two that probably are the most commonly known, at least in the YouTube sphere of the hobby. But there is lots of versions of that type of filter. Or whether you're talking the large like sump version that has a big moving bed chamber in a full sump. Because of how this is done, right? We're using air to move this plastic media, usually like K1 coldness. Sometimes you can use K3 and some of the other K medias, but K1 is the most typical media used in this. And there are other types of medias, don't get me wrong, but a media. Because that media is constantly moving and churning and knocking into itself and doing that, what it does is it inherently keeps itself clean. How? Right? Because it's continuously knocking against the stuff, it doesn't really allow detritus or anything to build up. And what that also happens to do is it means that any of your older or weaker beneficial bacteria can't really survive. They kind of get knocked off at the same time, and it's only the youngest, more vigorous, healthy bacteria that is going to live and sustain itself on that media. And because in order to keep that media moving and churning, we're using a relatively high flow rate of oxygen to create that movement, this is highly, highly, highly aerobic bacteria. So, consequently, we also end up with a really high biocapacity. As was mentioned in the comments by a few people, Greg Jones in particular. Shout out to Greg. He's a great content creator who's here as well, does all sorts of cool stuff in his fish room. But one of the reasons why moving beds are very popular, especially with monster fish keepers, is because a properly set up moving bed filter, and usually this is in the larger sump variety, but smaller ones can do this too, have an extremely high biocapacity for their size. And really nothing is going to beat the biocapacity of a moving bed filter. You can, but because of that natural continuous churn, that high oxygenation rate, you don't get bacteria that ages out and becomes less effective. You have only the most robust, healthy, and thus hungry bacteria colonies living. So the efficacy and efficiency of your bacteria colony is top charts, right? It's some of the best out there when it comes to versions of this type of media. And we previously talked about the wet-dry sump and how the way that is designed has heavy oxygenation and thus really good bacteria as well. Wet-dry doesn't hold a candle to moving bed filters. And this is why you will notice that a lot of people who might have in the past looked at something like wet-dry filter, typically it is more common in those types of tanks to now see moving bed filters. It's just kind of a transition of a better understanding of how bacteria works in our filters and things like that. Don't need to service it. The media itself, you never need to touch it. Now you might if you have like filter socks or some other, like you've got maybe a sponge attachment like in the Zist Bubble Bio that is designed to be your mechanical filtration. You might need to service that, but usually that is extremely fast, right? This is not something that takes a lot of time. But the rest of your media, unlike something like, say, a canister or a traditional sump, you never need to worry about having to go through and rinse it and clean it because of the natural design, that movement. It prevents detritus from building up and thus effectively means you never need to service that portion of the filtration, which is the dominant biological filtration for your entire tank. Even those smaller like pop bottle and Zist style ones, where you don't have as much media, you still never need to really service it because of the inherent design of the filter. It's just such a massive positive. Now, we talked about that. We kind of touched on this already, but also it has extremely high oxygenation rates, right? much like any other air-powered type filtration, because there's constantly air moving through the filter media and keeping that beneficial bacteria in the like highly aerobic style, it's also just naturally adding oxygen to your water system. So you're going to have a higher oxygenation level in your environment. This is another reason, again, why it's very popular with some of the monster fish keepers like arowanas and stingrays that want those good levels of oxygen. This is a filtration method that inherently boosts oxygenation levels in your aquarium and gives you very high rates of O2. Now you might be like, well, okay, wouldn't a negative be you can't use it in like a highly planted aquarium? You can. You can. It's just because of where the oxygenation is occurring, you could still use injected CO2 and things like that. But usually the target for moving bed filters is not like one of your high planted aquariums like this, although it certainly could be. You're usually using this in places where you need a really high bio-based filtration. You might have some alternate filtration method that works with it to do that mechanical filtration to get your water polishing and those kind of things. But really, this is the workhorse. The moving bed is a workhorse to make sure you have an extremely capable, beneficial bacteria colony so that your biological filtration is always really, really solid. And again, when it comes to especially the internal ones that you can set up inside your tank, because it's air-powered, it is really easy to make sure that through a power outage or some other similar thing, you can either A, put it on a minor battery backup, because really you just need the air pump to keep going, and the bacteria will be okay for a period of time, or B, run it entirely on air for the internal ones, and now you're not only oxygenating your tank even through a power outage if you have battery backups or pumps with built-in batteries, etc., you have your filtration running the whole time. Now you might go, okay, well, shouldn't the sponge be better, or maybe matte or something like this? It's all about what you're targeting, right? If you need that higher density of fish in an aquarium, let's say you were using like a breeding tank or a raising tank and you're raising lots and lots of baby fish, a sponge filter might not be enough to handle that. Similarly, a under gravel filter might not necessarily be the best option for the bio capacity with high levels of fish in it. And then it comes down to something like either a matten filter or a moving bed filter. And the major benefit with the moving bed filter is because of that natural design, right? That air tumbling the media. The bacteria is just a little bit more robust, so it can handle higher bacterial loads. If you're feeding a lot and maybe you can't like water change every single day, you might have a better chance of keeping everything in check and not having some kind of spike with the moving bed style filter. Now you might not be only able to do a single one of those little tiny pop bottle sized ones in a, you say, 20-gallon tank full of 100 babies. But if you do the DIY versions, they're cheap. It's a pop bottle, an airline, and a little bit of media. But the thing is, you'll get enough media when you buy it online to fill 6 to 10 of those pop bottles. So you can make a bunch of little filters super cheap and just have the DIY version running in your aquarium for extra biocapacity, extra oxygenation, everything you need. Everything that makes this filter a massive positive. It's hard to go wrong. Now I know. There were some of you who have maybe missed the whole, like, we're going back and forth on negatives and positives. Like, you said it was the worst thing ever last week. Now you're saying it's the greatest thing ever. It's part of the point. What we really want here is to spark some conversation, to talk about these different methods. This is why I want to get you guys involved in the comments. So, that's my call to action to you. Have you used any of the various types of moving bed filters out there, whether it's the full-size sump, maybe you've tried a little Zis bubble bio like I have, maybe you've made a built-in DIY pop bottle one, maybe you've got some other crazy thing you found that you've used as a moving bed filter. I want to hear from you in the comments down below. What was your experience? What did you like? What did you not like? Did you run into problems? You know, whatever those things may be. I will say that I very recently was at a relatively new fish store in my area who was using a bunch of moving bed filters and quite likes them. But because it's not a product he sells in his store, he would get too many questions about them. And so he was like, I'm going to change to a product I sell in my store. but he actually really liked them because their biocapacity and extra oxygenation was really, really effective for store tanks that have high numbers of fish in them. And that's from somebody who's running a store, has been selling fish for many, many, many years at like a store level just out of his garage. So it's clearly someone who knows what they're doing, right? Just a thought. Just think about that for a second. If stores do it, we see it in certain markets. Monster fish keepers have been using moving bed filters for a while. You can find videos from a certain fish keeper out in Nova Scotia who's done all sorts of tutorials on how to build them and why they were used with things like Asian arowanas. Not legal in the United States, but hey, monster fish, right? We're talking about monster fish. They have huge waste and thus need huge filtration. And moving bed is a really, really good way to handle that level of waste and filtration necessity. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Maybe consider sharing it. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. Ring the little notification bell. Join in the conversation. I really want to hear from you guys. Have you tried a moving bed? Do you not like moving beds? Do you not like the way they look? Are they too noisy for you? Is it just I just really like my sponge filter? Or maybe you're like, I think they're the best thing ever. Let me know in the comments down below. I love hearing from you guys. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.